since January 20. Served on the council since joining it in 2013, January 2013. I'm running for my third and final term, which would be allowed under the Metro Charter. And my history that led me to run for Metro in the first place, initially as Metro president back in 2010, is a focus on growth management, land use planning, city building, countryside conservation. As planning director of the city of Portland, executive director of 1,000 Friends of Oregon, staff attorney in the initial years of 1,000 Friends of Oregon many years ago. And governmental service that includes not only the city of Portland, but working for Governor Barbara Roberts, her final year and a half in office, and as chief of staff for Earl Blumenauer in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years. My passions around planning for the future have made me active in the urban growth boundary process, as the whole council is whenever we do one of those. My passion for environmental issues led me to be enthusiastic about an appointment that Tom Hughes made on the drive over to my inauguration in 2013. And I've served as a council liaison to the solid waste and recycling programs at Metro, the Property and Environmental Services Department of Metro for these past 8 years, helping fashion our waste reduction and recycling policies and strategies. In addition, I've had the opportunity to serve as we've expanded our parks program and initiated a regional housing program as well. Why am I running again? I worked my tail end off trying to get the housing bond passed, the parks bonds passed. I'm going to be working hard on the transportation measure, and I want to be around to make sure we do a good job with those.
Bob, can you just share with us what you think is your signature accomplishment as well as your signature disappointment at Metro?
Oh, okay. Singular accomplishment, because it was more or less single-handed, was taking on the problem that waste management and potentially other landfill and transfer station operators were using our waste stream to monetize investments in new landfills or expansions of existing landfills when we already had a 100-year capacity in our existing landfills. What that meant in practice was closing down shipments of garbage from the Forest Grove transfer station out to rural Yamhill County and dumping it in a landfill that was on the edge of the South Yamhill River's floodplain. And there was a community of interest out there to get that stopped. I felt it my opportunity to correct this oversight in a deal that Waste Management and Metro had struck 30 years ago to give them exclusive franchise until 2020. And they were using that at the last minute to try to expand this landfill. That landfill no longer gets garbage. We now have a policy that will only use our existing 100-year capacity, and we will focus on waste reduction, not landfill expansion.
And your signature disappointment?
Disappointment. I'm the eternal optimist. I don't think we have failed yet to do anything I want to see accomplished. I am pleased that we're not proposing to invest in freeways or road expansion as part of our transportation measure. I am pleased that we have three times persuaded the voters to maintain and expand our parks program. I'm gratified that the people of the region voted in favor of a regional role in affordable housing financing. And I would be hard pressed to say that there's something that went so wrong, I would call it a disappointment.
All right. Thank you. Leah, do you want to introduce yourself to us and tell us why you're running?
Sure. I'm a patent agent by trade, most recently. However, I have had a long and varied career, which has introduced me to a lot of different ways of thinking about the world. And one of my earliest insights about the world came in an 8th grade science class, and that it was the Earth is a closed system. So we can't really throw anything away because there is no such place as away. You know, we're all in this together, us and our garbage. And it was that insight that motivated me to learn more about our garbage system and how we're managing our solid waste. I got an additional insight to all of this in my electronics engineering technology program at Portland Community College. I did the specialization in renewable energy, and it was in that program that I learned about all of these different types of renewable energy resources that we have knowledge of, but just are not using. And the biggest insight to me from that came from learning about a process called pyrolysis, which converts any carbon-based waste, including hydrocarbons, which plastics are, into fuel. It uses a carbon neutral process. So it also, instead of combusting, it condenses the carbon into charcoal. So not only is this an exceptional way to manage our garbage, it also is a healthier way to manage our environment. Metro does have a pyrolysis facility currently at the Columbia Solid or Wastewater Treatment Plant, and they have been pyrolyzing the waste byproduct, as well as recently they started shipping in food scraps to be converted into fuel, which I think, you know, this is a great start. But what we really need to be doing is we need to be addressing our plastics problem. While plastics recycling is a thing in theory, because of the variety of plastics, it hasn't been very good in practice. When you think about glass recycling, pretty much glass is made up of all the same components. When you think about aluminum recycling, aluminum is a single component. When you think about plastics, if you think about the bottom of a plastics container, it has the 3 little chasing arrows and a number in the center. Well, that number is the type of plastic it is. There are numbers 1 through 7, and 7 is a catch-all category for every single other plastic that isn't 1 through 6. So, and right now in the United States, there's only a market for recycling plastics of type number 1 and number 2. So truly only about 30% of our plastics get recycled. The other 70% go into the landfill. And since Metro is no longer, or I'm sorry, since China is no longer taking our plastics recycling, this is really the time we need to be thinking about how we can manage our solid waste moving into the future. So this is what has brought me to run for Metro. Yeah, Mark.
Leah, can you back up a bit, just because you're new to at least me, and I assume to Aaron and Rachel, and provide a little bit more bio? Where were you born and raised? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
And while you're at it, I read your bio from your campaign website, and I'm interested to hear about your grandfather and his connection to plastics, and also about radical knitting. Yeah, as well as your position as a Wiccan priestess.
Sure. Okay. I want to make sure I catch all my bases here.
Leeds, just start by telling us about your professional career, if you would. You said you're a patent agent. I don't know what that means.
That I am a technical specialist who works with inventors to get their patent applications drafted and submitted to the United States Patent and Trademark Office.
You're not a patent lawyer.
No, I'm not an attorney.
So, but isn't that what patent lawyers do? So what do you do that patent lawyers don't do, or how does that intersect?
So I can do anything inside the patent office that a patent attorney could do. I just can't do anything outside of the patent office. So.
And how long have you been doing that?
I've been working in patents for the last 12 years. Earlier in my career as a paralegal, and then later as a patent agent. So
are you in a large office, or do you work on your own, or?
I had been working with a distributed law firm for about 5 years, but now I've been doing more independent work.
So what does that mean? Someone would hire you independently to help them file a patent?
Correct.
Gotcha. And how did you get into this business?
Well, I guess this is where my grandfather comes in. He is the person who had the first patent on a square bottom plastic garbage bag.
What's his name?
Arthur LaFleur,
Okay.
paternal grandfather. And he was an inventor. He and my father had a business where they invented a bunch of different types of plastic shapes of plastic bags and manufacturing processes for plastic bags and the manufacturing equipment for them. Mostly the focus was on the shipping of bulk goods. So if you've ever seen a square woven plastic bag on the back of a truck or a shipping container, that design was invented by my family.
Wow. So because of that, you became familiar with patents and then got into this work. And what got you to Oregon?
Well, I started off in Michigan. I moved to California in 2019 in 1998. It just sounds so weird to say those numbers. At the beginning of at the end of the tech boom and into the tech crash, came to Portland in 2001 after I was doing a job in human resources at a software company where I laid everybody off, and then they asked me to close the door behind myself on my way out. So had friends in Portland and came to visit here often and really loved it. Moved to Portland in February of 2001, and it has been my heart's home ever since I've been here. I love it, and I imagine I will live here for the rest of my life.
And it appears you've been active in politics, but this is your first bid for public office. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So you've told us that garbage is very important to you. Can you tell us what's wrong with Bob Stacey?
Well, I would say that Bob has definitely done a lot of work. He has come in with a great pedigree for transportation and planning, and has done a lot of work to forward those goals. When I see the 2020 transportation plan, I definitely see Bob's fingerprints all over that. So it's great that he has invested so heavily using his expertise and his skills in this area. But what I would also say is that the current Metro president, Lynn Peterson, also has a very strong history in transportation. I believe she was the director of Washington Department of Transportation. And that I also agree very strongly with the things that Bob has to say about how we need to reduce our carbon infrastructure, how we need to be focusing on public transportation over expanding freeways. These are things that I would definitely carry the torch for with Bob. But what I would say, and while I'm glad to hear that he has his liaison experience to the solid waste program, that he is missing the passion that comes with my experience and the leadership that would come to create this transition into a new way of managing our garbage. And I believe that that is a leadership that I bring to the table on this specific issue.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Would you like to hear about Radical Knitter? Okay. So when I was 6, my grandma taught me how to knit. And it's been something that I have done for a long time in my life. I learned more about different ways of knitting. I can knit sweaters now. I can knit socks. I knit toys for friends who are having babies. So that's been a real joy in my life. So when I moved to Portland in 2001, I met a woman from Burlington, Vermont, who told me about her mayor, this guy named Bernie Sanders, who just got elected to the House of Representatives. And I was pretty impressed to hear the kinds of things that she had to say about him. And, I would see him on C-SPAN at 2 o'clock in the morning, railing against income inequality or the prison industrial system or for Medicare for all or any things that he has consistently been supporting. And so I pretty much decided that if he ever ran for president, I would do whatever I could do to help Bernie get elected. And when he announced in May of 2015, I was in. And I got very involved with the Bernie movement here in Portland, taking on leadership position, leading a bunch of events, different kinds of things. One of the things that I did was a knitting service project that I called Beanies for Bernie. And what makes this radical knitting experiment is that it's not just creating something because you love someone or because you want to share it. This is knitting a movement, essentially. We got together once a month at the Lucky Lab on Hawthorne, and we met from August until the following in November. We ended up knitting 156 hats that got donated to the Portland Police Sunshine Division, all from knitting this movement. And that's what makes the knitting radical. I would also say another radical knitting project I had, as a Bernie supporter, you can imagine how painfully disappointed I was in November of 2016 when Trump was elected. A lot of people were very galvanized by that. And there was a movement to go to Washington, D.C. And I decided I needed to be there. And there was a pink hat that people started sharing the pattern for. And it is the easiest pattern to knit. And so I bought some pink yarn and I knit some pink hats and gave them away. And then I couldn't stop. I was knitting more and more hats. And this was another way that a movement was knit, by a large scale community of people who are weaving their energy into their projects to create this larger thing than any of us do individually. So that's what I would definitely say makes me a radical knitter. And it kind of weaves its way into the priestess part too. It's for a long time, the only way that you could be religious or spiritual and political was to be on the religious right. There wasn't really a voice or a place for people who were both spiritual and progressive people to express themselves. I think that this is kind of a new thing, and a lot of people who are Wiccan, like I am. I have been for over 30 years now. I was raised Catholic, but it never really resonated with me. I felt like I needed a more solid connection to the earth and nature than I was getting from the Christian representation of connection with spirituality. And found Wicca, which was a very honoring of both my femininity and of nature. And also it's definitely an area where women can explore leadership. This is not a thing in Catholicism. If women want to be leaders in the church, they can be nuns or they can be lay ministers or Sunday school teachers. These were not the leadership roles that I saw for myself. So being able to find a spiritual path that validated all of these things in me was very honoring. When I was in Michigan is when I began. This was before the internet. And I got most of my resources from book catalogs. When I moved to Portland in 2001, I found Full Circle Temple, which was a women's community here over at 32nd and Burnside on the east side. And it was a place where I grew in my spiritual path, where I took on leadership roles. and led ritual and communities of women within celebrations for both the new moon and full moons and the 8 Wiccan holidays. So I definitely feel like having that experience with my spirituality, with my political motivations, and with my opportunities for leadership, that I've been able to develop leadership in a very uncommon way, but it also in a way that really affects people personally.
Thank you for sharing that. So I would ask you to give us both of you to give us your top priority for what you want to accomplish as a counselor in the case of Bob in your next term. Can you start us off, Bob? Bob, are you there?
I had the mute button pushed.
Okay. We can't see that, I guess, to the phone line, so I just thought you weren't there. So can you tell us your top priority?
Sure. The future of this region is part of a larger question. Are we going to sustain the Earth? Are we going to reduce greenhouse gas pollution in accordance with the internationally accepted goals? And are we going to do enough here in this region to accomplish that? That's why I oppose pyrolytic conversion of plastic into fuel, because it means we're giving the plastics industry more license to pump oil and natural gas to create plastic feedstock, instead of implementing product bans and taxes to reduce consumption of plastic materials that can't be easily separated and recycled. That's the standard that Metro has set for itself in its regional waste plan and the solid waste roadmap, which invented the same phrase that Leah uses back in 2013, let's talk trash, as a means to draw people's attention to this ongoing dialogue about how we up our game in waste reduction instead of waste accommodation, in plastics reduction instead of finding ways to better recycle more materials at higher cost so they become diseconomic. So that's part one. Part two is considering our investment in transportation in 2020 as a first step. The second step has to be value pricing, congestion pricing of the entire roadway system. Metro can't do that by fiat. It has to swim upstream against ODOT's ill-conceived plans to put spot pricing on 2 freeway expansions as a way of funding freeway expansions. We have to work with the owners of the roadway systems, Portland, the counties, to develop a collaborative regional approach to managing traffic. And so we're in a consortium right now with the Port of Portland, TriMet, the City of Portland, to work on a metropolitan congestion pricing analysis that would complement and hopefully absorb the spot pricing that ODOT is looking at for the freeways. And if we make progress, we will have some form of pricing regulation that demonstrates it's unnecessary to build the Rose Quarter project. We can build the Albina vision, but we don't need to build a transportation project. So my priorities are to stop the highway machine while we still have time, stop the growth of greenhouse gas production in the vehicle sector, and God willing, elect a Democratic president who reinstates President Obama's standards for reducing carbon emissions from the vehicle fleet and upping that game considerably to advance the day when the cars that are still running run cleaner.
Hey, Bob.
Bob,
Should Metro take over TriMet?
I'd rather not talk about that simply because it is lawful for Metro to do so, and we are in ongoing discussions with TriMet about the vigor of their approach to issues such as electrification of the fleet and expansion of service. They have been partners in the work we're doing now. I would like them to be a better partner. I also think that Doug Kelsey, the new general manager there, is trying to do the right thing. And I don't want to cloud the relationship between the TriMet board and Metro Council by making premature expressions of interest in a Metro takeover.
That leads me to believe that you support conceptually the idea of Metro doing what it's allowed to do by law and take over TriMet, but you're concerned that the TriMet board and the TriMet executive leadership is opposed?
I don't know that the value proposition is accepted. And I don't want to get sideways with the governor or anybody else in the midst of making sure that we do the best possible job we can with the measure that we're now developing. The ultimate ideal strategy could well be that the Metro Council appoints the TriMet board, and we have that authority. But this is not a power play. This is an effort to get accomplishments and put before the voters a package that will make a difference as a first step to greater difference in the future.
So Bob,
TriMet is working with, yeah.
So let me ask just one more question about that. And I ask because, I know that you were the chief of staff for a period of time to Earl in DC.
Sure.
And you know that there is no elected official who has been, I think, more forthright about the importance of recognizing that governments have certain roles and they ought to do those roles, but they ought to not do the roles that they're not supposed to do. And you're probably one of the few people, along with me, who remembers what Resolution A is all about. So
sure.
I guess my
government makes sense.
my question is, transportation and transportation planning have always been part of Metro's birthright. So it seems to me to make sense that you're involved in TriMet. But I am somewhat concerned that Metro seems to be engaged in mission creep and doing things that I would think Earl would find objectionable because they really have nothing to do with Metro's mission. I'm desperately trying to get you to criticize Metro as a body of government so that I'm not hiding data here. Does it appear to you that Metro's been engaged in a little bit of mission creep?
Look, go back to your first question. Should we take over TriMet because arguably we could be more efficient if we had both the planning and implementation responsibility? That's a fairly stated question, and it's arguable both sides. We are not proposing to take over the administration, management, or design of human resources and housing voucher programs that are now operated by the 3 counties and Home Forward and the Joint Office of Housing Services in our Tri-County region. We're proposing to scale up existing programs so that they will help more people in a time when homelessness has gone from crisis to mega crisis. We're not proposing with our transportation measure to take over the streets of Portland or the roads in Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties. We're proposing to make resources available in certain corridors for the owners and implementers of those transportation systems to do a better job. Metro isn't creeping its mission. Metro is acting to fill the gaps so that regional strategies can work together with adequate resources and give the people an opportunity to invest in those regional strategies that are then implemented by experienced local partners.
Well, let me ask you this.
Same thing with TriMet.
You talked about the homeless measure, which is a good point because you could make the argument that that's mission creep. Metro has no role in providing services to homeless.
Right, and we have no role in building houses. But for 15 years, we've had this program of transit-oriented development, and we have helped finance more than 1,000 units, many of them affordable housing. We did not build a single one of those units, but we did act to put transportation dollars from the federal government into units that would aid the production of more rides for transit. With the housing measure that the voters approved in 2018, we're investing $653 million in the housing authorities of the three counties and the city of Portland and two suburban cities, Gresham, Beaverton, and Hillsborough, to implement housing programs that they're responsible for under our oversight. We're not building any housing. We're not owning any housing. So what we're doing is strengthening existing programs by bringing regional leverage to the problem with the public support. We're not building a housing department in Metro. We are overseeing the distribution of resources to people that have housing production departments.
But given that this isn't Metro's job, how comfortable are you with Metro's ability to oversee this?
Metro's job is to take on matters of regional significance. That's what the charter says. That's what the state law says. And the way we determine that is to make a finding and ask the voters if they agree that need is there and it should be funded. So, and that charter is our original mission. And the region has changed and grown, and so the things we do have to change and sometimes grow.
Bob, so one more question about this, and then I'll move on. I want to get Leah to respond as well. You are not part of the group that is coming in advocating for this homeless measure, but it is a Metro proposition. When they came in and talked to us, we were very concerned about the lack of any accountability for what services are going to be provided, how many people are going to be served. It was a classic case of, we're going to raise $500 million and trust us that it'll be spent effectively. Is that really good governance?
Well, we're not allowed to simply trust that other people will carry out the plans that they've described. But we do have a great track record of building accountability systems and implementing them to review plans that show how services such as the construction of more affordable housing units will be delivered. And that's what we're doing in this case.
Yeah, but you're aware that the voters aren't being given any details about how many people will be served. That and so after the fact, fine, Metro's going to be accountable. But in terms of what voters are being faced with right now, it is significantly incomplete about here's what you're going to get for the money. And is that really an appropriate way of asking people to raise taxes?
Look, what we're going to do is provide households that need rental assistance. And we think that there are something like 10,000 to 15,000 units of housing that are occupied by people who need voucher support but don't get it because the federal government withdrew from that sector and doesn't provide the kind of cash supplements to eligible households that matches the population growth in our region and in our country. Multnomah County, Clackamas County, and Washington County have run out of housing vouchers coming through the state from the federal government, but they still have people who need those vouchers to stay in the homes they have. So that's 15 people that won't be pushed onto 15,000 people that won't be pushed onto the street. That's a metric, and that's a metric that we're going to measure programs against. When it comes to mental health services, drug addiction services, we're going to be investing in existing programs that have proved their worth and hold them to metrics of performance consistent with the amount of dollars we're giving them. So that's how we're going to build accountability marks. We're not going to say, here's a check in the amount you asked for. We're going to say, show us the plan and show our oversight committee the details of that plan. If they recommend approval, we'll review it. Our staff will review it, and we'll approve the disbursement of resources. That's how we'll provide the accountability.
Okay, I want to get Leah to respond to that, but just one additional unrelated question, Bob. The charter has term limits in it, correct? And this, if you're reelected, term. I'm just wondering if principally you agree with the idea of term limits.
If somebody starts their political career at age 60, I think term limits are a great idea. I will have served 12 years at the end of this upcoming term, and it will be time for me to step aside. So that's as far as my experience allows me to take it. I know there's a lot of hopping around between positions in state and local government in our state and region because of term limits. And it becomes more difficult for people to develop an area of expertise. Voters are smart enough to see somebody who's not competent, somebody who can't do the job, somebody who's run out of ideas. And they have the opportunity every 2 years or every 4 years to throw those bums out. So no, I'm not a supporter of term limits. I happen to be satisfied with the way that term limits apply at Metro in my case, but that's as far as I would go in endorsing the idea that term limits are good for democracy.
Okay. Leah, do you have any thoughts about this Metro homeless measure and mission creep?
I actually strongly support the Metro houseless measure. When you look at the resources that are currently available, if there were more, they would be being used. You know, right now, programs that have been successful, like Cheers, are closing. So it's not that there isn't a need, there's just no funding mechanism. I really like that the Here Together coalition got together. It's social service organizations and community organizations who are generally on the front lines of these types of issues, but also the Portland Business Alliance representing business issues. And to me, it's really meaningful that those three very different types of organizations got together to craft a solution that they believe will work for all of them and address, you know, our Oregon has one of the worst homeless problems in the United States. You know, things are not getting better. And I do see that because Metro has weighed in the housing arena, that this is a good use for Metro to be able to positive impact in the community in ways that currently are not being served. So that's something that I think with the way that the group has come together, they have put in accountability mechanisms to an audit. There's also a cap on administrative money that gets spent. So, you know, and this will be a tax on high income earners and businesses. So the exact group of people who can afford to pay this tax. And, you know, it's a very small tax. It's a 1% tax on any income for an individual over $125,000 or for a couple over $200,000 and any business $1 million. So if a business makes $5 million and $10, they'll get taxed 1% on that $10. So it seems like a really good way to fund services that are currently just starving for resources and people who are, you know, being negatively impacted in a significant way.
Okay.
Great pivot, Leah. Don't answer the question the way it was framed. Answer the question the right way. Congratulations. Good job.
Thanks, Bob.
I feel like the subjects of this interview are revolting. Rachel, you want to ask the asking? Yeah.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Okay. We'd like to ask each of you to ask each other a question. So, Bob, we'll let you go first. If you would like to ask your opponent a substantive question regarding a place you might see it different.
Yeah, I think I already alluded to it, Leah. I'm concerned about the approach to pyrolytically treating plastics that can't be recycled, because we have put so much energy into recycling, and we're sort of bumping against that wall of cost exceeding benefit. The plastics that are recycled now, they have to be processed, they have to be separated. And the plastics industry is getting more and more creative about combining plastics with other materials into packaging that simply can't be recovered. So we're practically back to incinerating garbage. That's why, I just don't understand why you would focus on that rather than product bans and reduction of plastic materials in the waste stream.
Well, I absolutely would support anything that we can do to divert things from the waste stream in any way. I support the plastic bag ban and the single-use serving fork and spoon things that come with takeout now that you have to request them. However, I would say that reducing plastic to its original component is probably the most effective way that you can recycle plastic. You're turning it back essentially into oil. And then you can use it for anything. So, and because you're essentially making oil, you are also creating either a revenue offset or a revenue stream. So this, in the long term, is a thing that will absolutely pay for itself. So I think that we need to be attacking our waste problem from every conceivable angle. We also send so many things to the landfill that are still useful. We need to be diverting more things from the waste stream, using as many techniques as we can. And yes, I would agree that the problem of multi-component items definitely makes things more complicated. But I think that the more that we can invest in separating our stuff in the best way to keep as many things out of the landfill as possible, and then to turn our trash into treasure. It was very curious to me that earlier in this week, oil was trading at $0 a barrel. That's a carbon future I'd love to see, when we no longer have to extract our fuel, when we can process it ourselves municipally. To me, that just seems like the way we need to look at our future.
Great. Leah, would you like to ask Bob a question?
Let's see. What are you looking forward to accomplishing most in your upcoming term if you are reelected?
Well, this interview notwithstanding, maintaining a strong working relationship with TriMet and the other transportation providers as we try to move into a system that relies less and less on driving and tries to regulate the use of the roadway, both through pricing and redesign, so that it facilitates pedestrian movement, bicycle safety, crossing safety for pedestrians, and transit over single occupant vehicles. That means zoning the right of way in the way that the red lanes downtown do. Part of the transportation measure that we're posing, still developing, would be increasing the use of red lanes in places like 82nd Avenue and other killer arterials on the east side of Portland, and Tualatin Valley Highway in Washington County, and McLaughlin Boulevard in Clackamas County, so that we're making our communities safer for people at the same time we're reducing greenhouse gases. That's going to take a full 4 years to really nail down and get implemented, and it is my highest priority to change our relationship to the automobile.
Do you feel like this is also a priority that is shared equally highly by Metro Chair Lynn Peterson?
Absolutely, and I expect her to play a leadership role in it. And I think that having more than one voice that's informed about that on the council and is working hard on it is an asset, not a liability.
Great. Rachel.
So we'll ask you one last question. We generally at the end of these interviews have a lighthearted question that allows our readers to get to know you a little better. So this year it is themed for this time, and it is what odd thing or what thing in general will you remember most from this era of social distancing? Leah, do you want to go first?
I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she is not in school right now. When all of this started to kind of unravel, I was checking in with her about how she feels about what's going on. And she said, "I think it's exciting." I was like, "Really?" And she's like, "Yeah, you lived through 9/11 and, other things like that. And, this is just the first time that I've had this kind of experience take place in my life." And, you know, while there is definitely some truth to that, I would say if you went to Turkey, or if you went to Guatemala and you asked them what 9/11 was, you know, people aren't going to know. This is so different. The orders of magnitude of people's lives who have been affected, it's incredible. And that her filter is one of curiosity instead of one of fear was really a interesting insight for me and my family.
Thank you. It's really interesting to try and convince children that this is really unusual for all of us. That's been one of my experiences of this, is like trying to explain that none of us have ever experienced this. Bob, what's your what do you think you'll remember most from this time?
Yeah, first I have to get past what Leah was saying about the relationship with her daughter in this time, because in our household, in addition to Adrian and me, it's our daughter Hesper and our two grandsons. And having to slightly socially distance ourselves from men, even in the house, is challenging, because what you want to do is grab your youngest grandson every time you see him and play with him. And maintaining a little bit of, you know, even masking up in the common areas of the house so that we're not inadvertently exposing one another. That's telling to me. They were out and about, going to Dad's house and other parts of the community. We're trying to remain sequestered, and it's another stressor, in addition to running for office and doing all of my metro work by Zoom, to have that kind of fragmentation, and still having a little bit of fun, but at a 6-foot distance is not the same. More broadly, I just can't believe that in this crisis, Trump is screwing up even this to such an extent that he's endangering the lives of millions of Americans, daring governors to reopen their states prematurely, ending a quarantine, thankfully not getting in the way of very rare bipartisanship between the Senate and House on providing emergency relief to people like the 700 laid-off employees at Metro, and getting more unemployment revenue into the states. But to play brinksmanship with people's lives, if we hadn't already impeached him, we should for this. And it's becoming frustrating to have a rudderless national government at a time of international crisis. And that dominates my thoughts a lot. It's not very cheery, but it is part of my nightly anxiety that I have to work through.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for talking with us. And our endorsement issue will be out next Wednesday. So I hope you have a lovely day, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, Leah.
You too, Bob.
Thank you.